Welcome back. Tonight's story is about a postal inspector in Omaha who watched her mother die while a stranger's envelopes kept arriving at the hospice, and who walked into a federal courthouse 9 weeks later with a folder no one knew existed. Pour the coffee. Stay close. My husband's mistress mailed photographs to my mother's hospice room to break her heart before she died, so I pressed charges under federal law. My name is Lauren Whitfield. I'm 45 years old, I live in Omaha, Nebraska, and I have been a postal inspector for 19 years, which is a small detail that will matter more than anyone in this story ever imagined. The first envelope showed up on a Tuesday in February. Plain white, no name on the front, just my mother's room number at the Sunnybrook Hospice Center on Pine Lake Road, written in a careful slanted hand that did not belong to anyone in our family. The nurse, a woman named Bernadette Hollis, slid it into my hand at the front desk like it was a piece of glass. She said, "You might want to open this before your mom does." I remember the smell of the lobby that morning. Bleach and lukewarm coffee and the cheap lavender plug-in by the door. I remember the sound of the heater clicking on. I remember thinking, whatever is in this envelope, I am the wrong person to send it to. I just did not know yet how wrong. There is a thing you learn after you sit in a hospice for 41 days. You learn that the world keeps moving without your permission. You learn that some people will use a dying woman as a doorway to hurt someone else. If your gut already tells you what is coming, tell me in the comments. I want to see how many of us saw it from a mile away. My mother's name was Catherine Whitfield. She raised me and my older brother Daniel in a yellow 2-story house on 47th and Hickory, with a front porch that sagged on one side and a kitchen clock that ticked too loud. My father left when I was 9. He did not die. He did not get sick. He just walked into the garage one Saturday, packed a duffel bag, and drove to Tulsa with a woman named Brenda from his office. My mother never spoke a bad word about him, not once. She made grilled cheese for dinner that night, and the next night, and the night after that. And she paid the mortgage on a bank teller's salary for the next 16 years. That was the kind of woman she was. Quiet, steady. The kind who folded the dish towels in thirds and kept a small jar of buttons in the drawer in case anybody lost one. I married Marcus Whitfield when I was 26. He was a regional sales manager for a packaging company, and on paper, he looked like the answer to every question I had ever asked. He took my mother to lunch on her birthday. He sat through my brother's bad jokes at Christmas. He brought home grocery store flowers on random Wednesdays for no reason at all. I thought I had cracked the code. I thought I had built something my father had not been able to. There were 2 warning signs I ignored. The first was the way he watched the door at restaurants, like he was waiting for someone better to walk in. The second was a Sunday in 2019 when he told me, half laughing, that the trouble with loyal women was that they made loyalty look boring. I laughed too. I should not have laughed. By the fall of 2024, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She got the news on a Thursday. She told me on a Friday. By the following Monday, she had signed the hospice paperwork and asked me to pick out the dress she wanted to be buried in. She picked the navy blue one with the small white collar, the one she wore to my brother's college graduation. She said, "Do not let them put me in anything beige. I have been beige my whole life." That was the only joke she made about dying. Then she went quiet, the way she always went quiet when something hurt. In January of this year, Marcus started leaving the house at strange hours. He said it was inventory season. He said the warehouse was understaffed. He started taking his phone into the bathroom. He started keeping his car keys in his pocket instead of the bowl by the door. I noticed all of it. I am a postal inspector. Noticing is what I do. I just chose, for 40-something days, to look the other way, because my mother was dying, and I did not have room in my body for two betrayals at once. That was the choice I made. I am not proud of it. I am just telling you the truth. The first envelope arrived on February 11th. The second envelope arrived 3 days later. By the fourth one, the hospice front desk had a small stack with my name written on a sticky note on top of them. Bernadette pulled me aside in the hallway by the ice machine. She said, "Honey, I have worked in end-of-life care for 22 years, and I have never seen anything like this. I want you to know I have not let one of these reach your mother's hands." I opened the first one in my car in the parking lot. The heater was loud. The windshield was fogged. My fingers were shaking, but only on the left hand, which is a thing my body does when it already knows what my mind has not caught up to yet. Inside the envelope were 3 color photographs printed on cheap home printer paper. My husband, in a hotel room I did not recognize, with a woman I had never seen, in positions I will not describe to you because that is not what this story is about. On the back of the third photograph, written in the same careful slanted handwriting, were 6 words: "Tell Catherine before she runs out." I sat in that parking lot for 47 minutes. I did not cry. I did not call him. I did not drive home. I drove to the hospice supply closet, asked Bernadette for a clean manila folder, slid the photographs and the envelope inside, and wrote a date and a time on the tab. Then I drove back to my office downtown, and I pulled up the routing map for that postal zone on my work computer. And I sat there in the blue light, and I started to understand exactly which federal statute had just walked into my life. The return address on each envelope was a UPS store box on Dodge Street. That is not a real residence. That is a rented mailbox. Rented mailboxes require a credit card on file and a government-issued ID, and those records are subpoenable by a federal investigator with probable cause, which I happen to be. I did not file anything yet. I did not say a word. I just kept the folder in my desk drawer, locked, and I kept showing up at the hospice every morning at 6:45 with 2 coffees and a clean sweater for my mother, who was getting thinner and quieter and farther away every single day. If you have ever had to hold a smile together while your whole life is splitting underneath it, drop a 1 in the comments. I want to know I am not alone in this. My mother died on March 19th at 2:14 in the afternoon. The sun was out. The window was cracked open because she said the room smelled like medicine. Bernadette was holding her left hand. I was holding her right. The last thing my mother said to me was, "You were the easy one, Lauren. You were always the easy one to love." She did not know about the photographs. She did not know about Marcus. She did not know about the manila folder in my desk drawer that by then was 13 envelopes thick. I made sure of that. That was the only gift I had left to give her, and I gave it to her clean. The funeral was 4 days later. Marcus stood next to me at the cemetery in his good gray suit and put his hand on the small of my back, like he was holding up a wife. My brother Daniel flew in from Phoenix with his wife Rachel and their 2 kids. The pastor said the things pastors say. I watched a red-tailed hawk circle over the cedar tree behind the headstones, and I thought about how my mother once told me, when I was 11 and crying about something a girl had said at school, that some people will hand you a knife and call it a lesson, and your job is to set the knife down and remember who handed it to you. I set the knife down. I remembered. The day after the funeral, I drove to the federal building on Dodge Street. I walked past my own department. I walked into the office of a deputy chief inspector named Raymond Acevedo, a man I had worked under for 11 years, and I slid the manila folder across his desk. I said, "Ray, I need to formally recuse myself from this case because I am the victim, and I need you to assign it to someone clean." He opened the folder. He read for about 2 minutes without looking up. Then he closed it and said, "Lauren, this is 18 U.S. Code Section 1708 and Section 876, and depending on what the lab pulls off these envelopes, it could be more. Are you sure you want to do this?" I said, "Ray, my mother is in the ground. The woman who sent these knew she was dying. I am very sure." The investigation took 6 weeks. I was not the lead. I did not touch the evidence. I sat in my own office and did my regular caseload and waited. The UPS store box on Dodge Street had been opened on January 28th, paid for with a credit card belonging to a woman named Vanessa Crane, who turned out to be a 31-year-old account coordinator at the same packaging company where my husband worked. Surveillance footage from the UPS store showed her dropping off envelopes on 4 separate dates that matched the postmarks on the photographs in my drawer. The handwriting on the envelopes matched a notebook seized from her apartment with a warrant. The photographs were pulled from a cloud account she shared with my husband, who, it turned out, had been the one to take them, and the one to print them, and the one to slide them into her hand and say, "Send these to her mother, it will speed things up." That last sentence is not a guess. It came out of a recorded phone call between Marcus and Vanessa on February 9th, 2 days before the first envelope arrived. He thought he was being careful. He was not. Take a breath with me. I know this part is heavy. After my mother died, I did not move out of the house right away. I needed Marcus to keep believing that I was the same Lauren he had married, the quiet one, the steady one, the one who folded the dish towels in thirds. I made him dinner. I asked him about his day. I let him kiss me on the forehead before he left for work. I am not going to pretend that was easy, because it was not. There were nights I sat on the bathroom floor with the water running so he could not hear me. There were mornings I drove to the cemetery before sunrise, just to sit on the wet grass and tell my mother that I was almost done, that the thing she taught me about setting the knife down was the only thing keeping me upright. I rented a small 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of the city under my maiden name, Lauren Pierce. I moved my mother's quilt, the framed photo of her and my father from before he left, and the wooden recipe box she kept on top of the refrigerator. I bought a rescue dog from the shelter on 72nd Street, a 6-year-old beagle mix with a gray muzzle and a chunk missing from his left ear, and I named him Atlas because he carried himself like he had already survived something. I started seeing a grief counselor named Diane Lott on Tuesday evenings. She did not ask me to forgive anyone. She just asked me what I wanted my life to look like on the other side of all of this. I told her I wanted a porch with a sagging side and a kitchen clock that ticked too loud. She wrote it down in her notebook like it was a real plan. The federal indictment came down on May 23rd, 9 weeks after my mother's funeral. 2 counts of mailing threatening communications, 3 counts of obstruction, 1 count of conspiracy. Marcus was named as a co-conspirator. Vanessa was named as the principal. The U.S. Attorney's Office called me on a Thursday afternoon to tell me that arrest warrants had been issued and that I might want to be somewhere other than my home when they were executed. I was sitting at my kitchen table when I got that call. Atlas was asleep on my foot. The kitchen clock was ticking too loud. I said, "Thank you for the courtesy. I would like to be present." I drove home that night. I did not park in the garage. I parked across the street under a streetlight, and I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off and watched 2 unmarked sedans pull up at 7:18 p.m. I watched 4 agents walk up the porch I had repainted 3 summers in a row. I watched Marcus open the door in his gym clothes with a beer in his hand. I watched his face when he saw the badges. I watched him turn his head and look across the street, and I watched the exact moment he saw my car and understood. I got out. I walked across the street slow. I did not yell. I did not cry. I stopped about 6 feet from the porch, close enough that he could hear every word, far enough that no one could ever say I touched him. I said, "Marcus?" He said, "Lauren, please." I said, "Do you remember what you told Vanessa on the phone on February 9th? He went still. I said, "You told her to send the photographs to my mother because it would speed things up. You said those exact words." He opened his mouth. I said, "My mother was the easy one to love. You handed someone a knife and told her to use it on a dying woman in a hospice bed. You did not just cheat on me. You tried to make my mother's last weeks the worst weeks of her life so that I would be too broken to stop you from leaving clean." I looked at him for one more second. I said, "You forgot what I do for a living." Then I turned around and I walked back to my car and I drove away while the agents were still putting him in the back of the sedan. If you have stayed with me through all of this, thank you. Tell me in the comments what part of the story stayed with you the most. I drove east on Pacific Street with the windows cracked and Atlas waiting for me at home, and my mother's quilt folded on the passenger seat where I always kept it now. I talked to the little girl I used to be, the 9-year-old who watched her father pack a duffel bag in the garage and decided right then that she was going to be the kind of woman nobody ever did that to. I told her she was wrong about one thing. I told her that the trick was not making yourself impossible to leave. The trick was making sure that when somebody tried to take a piece of you on their way out the door, you had quietly, patiently, for years, become the exact kind of woman who could put them in front of a federal judge. I told her my mother knew. I told her my mother had always known, since the grilled cheese nights, since the dish towels folded in thirds, since the jar of buttons in the drawer. Some people hand you a knife and call it a lesson. You set the knife down, you remember who handed it to you, and one day, if you live long enough and stay quiet long enough and pay attention long enough, the federal government picks the knife up for you. The kitchen clock at the new apartment ticks a little softer. The porch sags on the right side instead of the left. Atlas is asleep on my foot. My mother is buried in the navy blue dress with the small white collar, and I am, finally, easy to love again.